Healing Quest video series, a step-by-step guide to holistic health. Today's program will discuss relationships.
Well, my name is Shelley Lesson-Stockwell, and I'm a hypnotherapist, transpersonal hypnotherapist, which means that I'm very interested in all states of consciousness, the subconscious and the conscious and the superconscious, the part of us that knows expanded things like past lives and future lives, and is very intuitive, highly creative. So I'm interested in that as a hypnotist, and I'm also a trance channel, which means that I put myself into an altered state and my guides speak through me.
In this show, we'll explore the intricate nature of relationships. We'll actually attend a weekend relationship workshop and see how independence and interdependence work, the value of communication, how important it is to share values, and you'll see reenactments of strategies that you can use in your own life and in your own relationships.
In our first video on creating successful relationships, we went into 3 elements: understanding, purpose, and love. And we went into great depth and understanding about commitment, about joy, about compassion, about direction and speed, about listening to your partner. And now what we're going to do is to move on to other elements equally as important to understand and practice. The dynamics of relationships, the types of relationships that you can have. What happens when you want to complete a relationship? What happens when somebody dies? There are 5 distinct stages in completing a relationship. One of the most controversial topics in a relationship is money. Let's look at that this time. How to negotiate about the important things in a relationship. There are definite skills in negotiation. We're also going to show you the importance of understanding sex in the relationship, the importance of creating your future, the importance of emotions in a relationship. So to start with now, we have types of relationships.
Relationships can be categorized into 2 general categories. The first one is the inner relationship, and the second one is the outer relationship. The inner relationship refers to the relationship with myself, and the outer relationship refers to the relationship with other people. And in the inner relationship, one of the ways it's so important because the inner relationship basically describes what I believe about myself, what I think about myself, and ultimately how I think about myself and how I behave towards myself is going to be reflected in how I behave towards others. And the model that we use in describing the inner relationship is the diamond, and the belief is that who I am is essentially pure and innocent and magnificent, and someone who's very spiritual and something that's very special about me. But surrounding this beautiful core diamond part of myself, there exists this layer of fear. It's a layer of conditioning. And the fear really is to do with the belief that I'm not all right, I'm not okay, and that there's something wrong with me. And what happens is, as a defense to this fear, we surround that with the other line, which is the image. It's the projection I put out to people around me, and it's a way of protecting myself from this deep inner fear. And when I'm walking around and I'm interacting with other people, I never get to see much more than my own image, and they think this is who I am. But my true self, who I really am, is something more than that. And in order to get to my true self, I have to go through that level of fear. In an intimate relationship, when 2 people come together, what happens is they've gotten close to each other so that the initial image has dropped away, and both levels of fear are starting to interact. And this starts to create the problems and the difficulties in relationships. And what we're looking at is how can two people who love each other and who you would imagine should be closest and most supportive with are the ones that they find the most difficult to be with. And it's because that this fear level is coming up in both parties. And part of what we discuss in this tape is how can we handle this level of fear that comes up and the two people interact and connect and get caught up in their issues. So the first relationship I'm having with myself then is looking at how do I get past the image that I project out to deal with the fears that exist there and ultimately connect to the diamond that's within. If I don't do it consciously, then I believe that life will bring it to me. It'll come to me either in an accident, a marriage breakup, something happening at work, a physical illness, these sort of things. And these are called breakdowns. If I go for it consciously and I take it on as a strategy, it becomes a breakthrough. And rather than it resulting in something not working in my life, I actually result in something working even better in my life. And what I've broken through is the barrier of fear. But in a relationship, when we now combine these two models and we bring the two people who both have their diamonds, when they first meet, the diamonds meet, there's no inhibitions there, and it's this magic time. And the way we describe it is it's the 6-week lust test. You know, for the first 6-8 weeks, it's this wonderful romantic time and both parties are feeling really fabulous and fantastic and together, and it's all bliss time. Then somewhere after about a couple of months, it starts to change. It's not quite as shiny, it's not quite as bright. Things start to lose their glow. Why? What happens? And the issues that have sat there in their unconscious start to surface. And the fears that they have start to come up between each other in the relationship. One party may feel, well, this person's going to leave, I'm going to lose them, what's going to happen? The other one, can I trust them? Will they really commit to me? Is this going to be okay? A whole lot of doubts start to come in. And then you have a situation, possibly within a year or 2 years after the initial coming together, where the fears that both people have not been able to express to themselves or to other people starts to come up in their relationship. And if you're not careful, what happens is those fears get projected onto your partner, and they become the reason why you shouldn't be in the relationship with your partner. But really, it's just the manifestation of your own unconscious pattern and your own unconscious issues. And it's trying to understand, well, what's going on? How can we change that? And the irony is the person I love the most is the one with whom a lot of these issues will come up the most. And I will love this person and be very connected to them, and yet it's very difficult to be in a harmonious relationship. And so part of this next section is also looking at why that occurs and how we can change it, and looking at what are the stages that we go through in a relationship with other people. And this brings us to the second thing. The second bit is other people, the outer relationship. And that in turn goes through 3 stages. And the first stage is the dependent stage, and then it moves into the independent stage, and then into the interdependent stage. And with the dependent stage, it's typified by two people being in a relationship and they're kind of like leaning on each other. They're unable to maintain themselves on their own. They can't stand up by themselves. They need the other person to stay together. Invited by the boss to a company dinner, and there'll be about 8 of us. Action.
So you're going to come out for dinner with us? Everyone's going to be there.
What, with your boss and all those catty women? They don't like me.
Yes,
they don't. No, they don't like me. They all whisper. I can tell that they're, running their eyes over me going, I can tell. I just don't know.
I really want you to be there.
No, no. Why do you need me there?
Of course. Everyone else wants to be there.
Yes, but I wouldn't mind if it was interesting, we had fun, but we don't. And all the women sit together, all the men talk, and...
When I was in my first marriage, it was very much a dependent relationship. I was looking for a strong, powerful woman, and she was looking for a strong, powerful man. And we didn't feel secure in ourselves. And we both got involved in this relationship looking for the other person to provide something that was lacking in me. And at that time I lacked a lot of self-esteem, and I was looking for some woman who could, in a sense, be strong and look after me. I wasn't aware of that at the time I was doing it, but it's something that became apparent many years later as I began to look back and realise why didn't that relationship work and how could I correct it so it didn't go on to a future relationship. And I realised I was in a dependent situation. And the characteristics of a dependent relationship are that they both need each other, they're afraid of change, they're afraid of changing the status quo. Security is usually very important. What happens is that there may be a time when one party wants to go and leave the relationship and the other party doesn't want them to go and hold on to them. And then it flips, and then the other party wants to leave and the other person doesn't want to let them go. And so they kind of oscillate between, yes, I'm going to leave, no, I'm not going to leave, well, then I'm going to leave, and then they don't leave. And so it's this situation. It can go that way, or it can just be two people sticking together, not really communicating, not really expressing what's going on, but it's holding on to each other and not really trying to get to the bottom of things or really talk about the issues, because it may bring up too many things that they can't deal with. They don't want to put the relationship under threat in any way. They're afraid. They're dependent. They're caught in. They're hooked up. And so that ultimately long-term doesn't work. It creates a major problem down the road. In the relationships that we have today, where values have changed and they're different from the relationships we had with mum and dad, a relationship is unlikely just to continue because the marriage vows were exchanged. Today, a relationship is going to continue because there's some fundamental basis for that relationship to exist, and it will not exist long-term in the dependent relationship. It's highly unlikely in today's climate that will happen. And so then what happens is the people move on to the next stage of a relationship, which is called the independent stage. And in the independent stage, what happens is each person's reached a point of their own personal power, and they decide to step away from each other. And this can happen either that they physically break up the relationship and become two separate individuals, or it can be that they remain within the relationship, but they live separate lives. They might share the same house, they do a certain amount of things together, but there's no real intimacy between them. And basically they're living their own separate lives, and they're two people just coexisting together, but there's no real relationship between them.
So, are you coming to the work party tonight?
When's that?
Tonight?
No, I'm tired.
You'll love it. Come on, you'll love it.
I think I'll just stay and watch TV. That's really what I'd like to do.
Fine, if that's what you want to do.
I do.
I'll go and I'll catch you tomorrow.
Later on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye.
This is
Bye.
actually a step of empowerment out of the dependent stage, and it's a positive step, but it's still incomplete. It needs to go further, because being independent, finding what you want, having what you want is important and very necessary, and it's a healthy stage in a relationship if two people are together where one person wants to kind of do more things on their own and kind of find themselves a bit more. If the other person can understand that and give them permission and support them in that process, it'll actually strengthen and empower the relationship. But if the other person sees that as a threat and tries to inhibit the person from going on and taking that independent step, what will happen is the first person will see the situation as being limiting, entrapment, too needy, too dependent, and they'll start to reject the other person. They'll start to move away, and that'll actually accelerate the process of splitting up, and it'll actually polarize the need for independence. So the irony in this situation is, if I want to achieve a successful relationship, in this instance, what I have to do is give permission to the other person to find their independence and help them, and they'll feel freer. Now, if we can stay with that and go through the stage on that, what will happen is the relationship should come back together more strongly if there aren't other issues that are compounding the situation. So after we've moved out of the independent stage, we then move into the interdependent stage. And with the interdependent stage, it's here are two people standing side by side, joined by the mutual love and support that they have for each other.
I was just thinking, I should go and see Mum tomorrow afternoon. I just wondered if you want to come with me.
Tomorrow afternoon, it's not good for me. I said I'd go and help Jim with his driveway.
What time? Well, what do you think?
Well, I'm helping Jim at 3 o'clock, so what time did you want to go and see your mum?
What's going to be about that time? What I was suggesting, I think we should go and see her.
Well, okay, if you think it's really important to go and see her, well, we could go and see her on Sunday.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then I can go and see Judy. I can go to the art gallery, and then I could do that while you're doing the other, and then
Great.
we can go and see Mum on Sunday. That'd be
Okay.
great.
Fantastic.
That'd be great.
It's a much
good.
healthier, more mature sort of relationship. Sure, I'm independent, I've got my own life, and at the same time, I'm able to share my life with my partner. And so we are two people standing together. As the poet Khalil Gibran says in his book, The Prophet, he says when discussing marriage, it's like two pillars of the temple, together yet apart, supporting the same roof. And it's like two people in a relationship, together yet fully complete individuals, with the common purpose of the joint relationship, sharing the love together. And this is ultimately the mature state in which a relationship can exist long term. And in today's society, that's the sort of thing that has to occur. And so relationships go through the stages of dependent, independent, and interdependent. And it finally becomes stabilised and mature at the interdependent stage. And this, to me, I would recommend to people as being the goal for their relationship, to bring their relationship through to an interdependent stage.
So many clients come to me and they ask, Denise, I need to complete this relationship. What's the best way of going about it? Or sometimes it might be that somebody has lost another partner through a death or illness. And so what I've come to understand is that there are 5 elements in the completion of a relationship. And just think about this for any of your relationships that you've ever had. And perhaps it would be good to take time out to do these parts of the completion. Parts of the completion also can happen when you want to start afresh in a relationship. It may be that you've had a distant relationship with a brother or sister or mother or father, and you think, but I want to start afresh. How can I start afresh in this relationship? So the idea is to use these 5 stages of completion and then start afresh. So it's excellent for present relationships, and it's excellent for clearing the energy, ready to move on to new relationships. And if you haven't completed, then you'll be bringing in your old material into any new relationship. So the first stage is what we call bringing out of denial. Bringing out of denial the pain of the relationship. Bringing out of denial the pleasure of the relationship.
Well, it's clear that things are not going to improve. So I can't see any way around this. I really think the only solution is that we separate. That'll have to be, maybe we should set a definite date, something like 30th of June or something like that. And actually, I think that's
Separate.
the only solution.
Sometimes because we have so much pain, we'll just shut off, or shut off our heart, or shut off our brain. We won't think about that person anymore. We won't feel about them anymore. And we think we've completed and that time heals. The truth is, time does not heal. Time will put an extra layer on top of the wound, but the wound will still be under that. And we will still act out from that wound. So it's bringing out of denial. And this might look like simply that, yes, all the loving things that I thought about this person, or it might be all the angry things that I've thought about this person. And what needs to happen here is for you to write this out. Write out all the wonderful things that happened when you were with this person, all the things that made you angry. Or if you have got an opportunity, verbalize it with the person and or somebody else. For this completion process to work, it does not have to be done with the original person. It's not necessary. Often that person is not in a space to be with you, that doesn't want to hear how angry you are with them. The main thing is that you're doing it for you, to get that stale energy out of you. So that's the very first part, bringing it out of denial, that the relationship is finished and how you felt about it. The next part, the next stage, is actually what we call the emotional stage. In other words, allow yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to feel the loss of that relationship. Allow yourself, if necessary, or if it's under there, to feel the anger and the rage of that loss.
Well, I feel I'm not being listened to. Doesn't matter what I say or whatever suggestion, you just do your own thing. And it's always the same. I feel that I'm just disregarded. I mean, it doesn't matter. I could just fall in a hole.
And
it doesn't really
again,
matter, does it?
this is very important to get out. And again, sometimes it might need one-to-one counselling with somebody else who is there and acts as a surrogate person to hear your grievances, to hear your loss, so that you can really start to feel it in a very deep, profound way. If you're constantly sad, know that that sadness has to do with loss or perceived loss. And if you're constantly angry with the other person, know that that has to do with loss of your own power. So the second stage is the emotional stage. It is a very active stage and you need to go through it. There's no way except through it. It's not an intellectual stage at all. The intellectual understanding, which is the third stage, cannot take place effectively until the emotion is right out there, felt to its depths. And then the third stage, which is the understanding stage, can come in. And within the understanding stage, what we need here is to understand my part in creating that relationship and in creating the separation and the completion. Understand your partner's role in the relationship and in creating the relationship and the separation. And then understand what we call the good purpose of the relationship. What did I learn from that relationship? What can I carry forward into my future from it? How did it serve me at the time? It might have been that that was a relationship that was the best relationship for my children to be born into. It might be that that relationship or that sister, that you learned a lot from her, or the father or mother. But there'll always be a lot of positive reasons, even though you mightn't know them at the time. But once you get right through the emotional stage, they'll be able to come and you'll be able to understand what was your part, what was the other person's part, and what you had to learn from that.
Well, I mean, I've thought about it all and I've really come to see that I was really acting out of my hurt child. And I think I was reacting to you being like my father.
So that
acting like
leads
my
on to
father.
the fourth part of the completion process. And this is the forgiveness. And here, again, to start and just say, I forgive you, when you still have the rage and the hurt inside does not work. You need to go back, if you cannot really feel the forgiveness, and go back to the emotional stage and then the understanding stage. Because forgiveness sets you free. the way I look at it is that revenge is a way of actually getting back at somebody. Forgiveness is giving up the need for revenge. Forgiveness is giving up the need for revenge. I understand now my part in it. I understand the other person's part in it. I see what I've learned from it, and I can forgive that person for what happened, for their acts. They truly are not that person. That was just their act that they went through when they were with me. They, like you, and remember that we mentioned this, and I mentioned this in our first video, are that unique, wonderful diamond of love and intelligence and light. So we're not forgiving necessarily the acts, but we're forgiving the person. We're not forgetting the acts as such. They might have been wrong, but we are understanding the purpose, and we're understanding, and then we can forgive the person. So it's forgiving the other party and forgiving myself. And once we've completed with forgiveness, and the way that I like to do this with my clients is to write a special letter. And in this letter, I only say thank you. Thank you to the other person I was in relationship with. And of course, most people can't do that because they haven't allowed themselves to go through the emotional hurt and rage, let alone gone into understanding and then forgiveness. So if they can reach that forgiveness, or if you can reach that forgiveness within you, try writing a thank you letter to the other person.
You know, I really, really think that without this relationship, I couldn't have learned what I've learned. So, you know, I really appreciate that. I also think that there's so much that you've given me.
There's two ways I sometimes view this. If in 100 years' time I am looking down on my life from afar, I could actually see how each segment fitted in with the other, and I could say, wow, thank you for that experience, because then that enabled me to go on to something else and give up what was better, best, for what was better, and then give up the better for the best. But we can't do that. We're not 100 years away. So it's like, okay, what was the good purpose of that relationship? And sometimes it's much easier from afar, 5 years down the track, a year down the track. You come into clarity. But there'll always be a good purpose. And so from that point of view, there always needs to be a giving thanks. Giving thanks for the experience, for having that person in your life when it was right for you at that time.
One of the biggest difficulties that occurs in a relationship is the ability to negotiate with your partner. And one of the major sort of causes that creates marriage breakups is that the two parties can't communicate and resolve differences. And you would think, here's two mature adults who love each other and really care for each other and really want the relationship to go, and it's genuine, and yet they're not able to, and they get stuck, and they can't get through that blockage. And after a while, if the issues don't get resolved, they start to compound, and they get worse and worse and worse, and until the two parties are so polarised with each other that they can't be in a relationship together anymore. And so the art of negotiation and the ability to be able to communicate and problem solve with your partner is an essential, very important ingredient in being able to make a relationship work and be healthy. But in order to do that, it's important to understand the sort of things that occur, the dynamic that occurs between two individuals. So you may have a situation where two people are upset about a particular thing. For instance, they may be wanting to buy a house, or they're trying to work out what do they want. And one person wants to live in the mountains and the other one wants to live by the ocean. And we're trying to see how can we negotiate. This is something really important. This is something very, very special. This is something that means something for their entire lives.
Have a look, have a look.
What is it?
I've seen the house that we've been looking for ages. It's in Laura.
Actually, you.
No, it's in Laura. This one's in Laura.
Laura.
Yeah.
I thought I wanted a house at on the Central Coast by the beach.
But I've always wanted to live in the mountains. And we can afford it, and it's private.
I thought
and
we
it's
had
got
an,
a private,
an
it's got
agreement
the best
that
view.
we would go to the coast.
No, I really want to live in the mountains. I want to live in the mountains with a fireplace and glass. And
When did you
and
change
this
it?
is perfect. I've never changed my mind. I've always wanted to live in the mountains.
So, you know, I never knew about that. I thought we were moving to the coast.
No. I don't want to move to the coast.
You don't want to move to the
No.
coast? No, I've had my heart set on a place up at Avoca that I've been looking at.
Well, I didn't know that either. I mean, where? And it's not practical.
It's just what I've always wanted to do, and I thought you...
And on a
you
rational
said-
level, you would imagine they could come to some understanding and some working out. If it's only a rational argument, if it's only the two people trying to talk the facts through, then generally there's no problem. There's no need to go into major negotiation. You're just communicating, you're sharing your points of view, and it's a very simple matter. It usually only becomes a breakdown and a major problem, and negotiation skills are required when there's the emotional component. And so what happens is when two people are arguing, very often what's being said is not the real issue. They may be talking from their rational adult and saying, I want this, and this is the way it should be. But somewhere below that, there's a subplot that's occurring, and this is the emotional child. And the emotional child says it wants something else. And the same with the other person. So look, the other person, his emotional child isn't being dealt with or isn't being heard as well. So the first person's emotional child saying, I want to have it this way because I'm important and I need you to listen to me. And the second person's emotional child thinking, well, I'm going to miss out and I'm not going to get what I need. And the whole thing is, we're talking about one's living in the mountains and the other one's living on the ocean, but that's not really the issue. The issue is someone feels as though they're going to miss out. It's not going to happen. In the process of negotiation, I believe that it doesn't really come about and be solved until the emotional child in some way is satisfied, until one person's emotional child thinks, yes, I'm being heard, it's okay, it's going to be all right. And the other person thinks, oh, I'm being heard too, and I can listen to this person, and yet my needs are still being met. And until both emotional children are being met, the negotiation won't happen. And a typical situation occurs where an upset can happen in a relationship, and one party says, look, it's my turn to be listened to, it's my turn to be looked after, and what about me?
We're not moving and that's it, you know, we're not moving. I can't stand you changing your mind like that. It's crazy.
I never changed
it's
my
crazy.
mind. I never changed my mind.
You're
I've
mad.
always wanted to live in... I am not mad. And I've
What-
always wanted to live in the mountains.
What
I
are-
will live in the mountains.
What are we going to do when we move to the mountains, huh?
We're going to have a perfect, peaceful
Sure, a
life.
perfect peaceful life with
Yes.
no income.
Oh, wow. So you can go down the beach and surf. That's all you would do.
We can
I
surf.
want to
You
live
can
in the
have.
mountains.
You
I wanna
can
get
have.
away from
You
the
can have the
coast.
bush. I can surf.
I don't-
And I can still keep the job I've
What,
got now.
down there?
Without travelling 2
How
hours
am I
to the
going
bloody
to get to the
Blue
mountains while you're at the coast? How am I going to
Rubbish.
get...
It's unlikely during an argument that someone's going to be aware enough to be able to talk to the emotional child. Most of the time, two parties are just overwhelmed by their own emotions and they're not unable to really look at the thing clearly, and it's just amazing projection going on. Sometimes you may be able to catch yourself and say, yes, this is what's going on, and this is that person's emotional child, and this is my emotional child, and let's just kind of have some strategy to handle that situation. And a way of not compounding the situation and making it worse. You may be able to, if you really catch it, talk to the emotional child and resolve it there and then and deal with what that emotional child is really saying. If you are able to do that, that's fabulous, that's fantastic. But it's highly unlikely. And so there's a number of strategies that you can put into place in order to handle the argument and so that it doesn't exaggerate and get worse. One of the first things is we have this thing called the 50-minute rule, which is that if you've been together and you've been discussing something and you've taken 50 minutes and you haven't come to a resolution, then have a break. Take some time out, because the emotion is just being compounded and exaggerated and getting worse. And you don't want it to get any worse. There was a time with my ex-wife where we would have arguments that would go for literally all night, a 12-hour argument. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And the original cause of the argument was well forgotten. 4 hours into it, it was totally forgotten. And things from the past were just being dredged up. And the situation was just compounding and getting worse. It just wasn't on. It was just going. And we didn't understand at that time the 50-minute rule. And so it means, okay, after 50 minutes, you haven't resolved the issue, then take a break. Let it go. Make an agreement at that time. Look, we can't resolve it at this moment. Let's take some time out. It could be anything from an hour, half an hour, or it could be till the next day. And you make an agreement at that time. We'll come together again, maybe tomorrow at a certain time, and continue the discussion. And the same 50-minute rule continues. If you haven't resolved it within the 50 minutes, then you continue it. Then you say you go for 50 minutes, and then you continue the argument on another time. And when you give yourself that break in between, it's not building, it's not exaggerating, it's not getting worse. And it gives the opportunity for the emotion to subside and to get to the real issue later on. 50-minute rule is important. The other thing is, if you are with your partner and there is an issue arising, don't be the therapist to your partner, because straight away your partner will see that as you taking the superior position and you're being the parent figure and they're the child, and you're healing them, and it'll immediately put their back up and they'll want to fight you on it because you've taken their power away. Suddenly you've assumed the high moral position. You've got the answers. You know what it is. It doesn't create a solution. All it does is create more separation. So be a friend, don't be a therapist. The other thing is finding ways also to handle the emotional energy. If I'm with the other person and I have this upset, then it's not okay that I project the upset onto the other person. I may say, okay, I'm feeling angry, and I am angry, but I don't have to be angry at the other person, because all that's doing is compounding the situation, polarising the person, and they're building up and they're wanting to now come back and fire back the same level or more energy than you fired at them. And the thing just keeps escalating. It's like in the Cold War between Russia and America. They're just getting bigger and bigger bombs all the time to annihilate each other. And it doesn't work. So you need to find strategies to handle your upset and your disappointment and your hurt. And that could be anything from going for a run, having a swim, taking a bath, having a shower. Singing helps. Sometimes drawing, painting, going and having a lie down and having a rest. But you need to take the emotional energy out of that negotiation with your partner, especially if it's gone near to the end of the 50 minutes, because all that's going to do is you're just going to be repeating yourself and going around in circles, and nothing of substance is being achieved. And so learn how to handle your emotional energy. This needs to be done on a regular basis. You can't just wait for an upset. It's a matter of doing things like regularly exercising, having a swim, taking singing lessons, dancing, things that are fun. It doesn't have to be difficult. It helps you keep emotionally fit.
Look, what I want to live near the beach, okay? I want to be within 5 minutes of the beach. I need to be within an hour of Sydney for work, and you know that.
I know. That's what you want. But I mean, the thing is, that's not what I want. So how are we going to resolve this then?
What do you want?
Well, I mean, I always imagined I'd be in the mountains. I want peace and quiet. I want a fireplace. I want to be away from the public. I want
Look,
trees,
I think
bush
we can.
around
I can
me.
think we can find somewhere close to the beach, an hour from Sydney, that has a peaceful bush surrounding.
Well,
Definitely.
as long as, well, what about if there's a lot of public around? Because public, there's always, by the beaches, there's always people coming and
Yeah.
going.
There
How
are.
can we solve that?
There are places on the Central Coast that there's a lot of bush and nature, and it's peaceful.
Well, we'll better get a map and have a look.
Yeah, well,
Or if you
that's
wanna
what we'll do.
that.
That's what we'll do next weekend. We'll go looking for somewhere close to the beach that is peaceful, that's surrounded by nature.
Another thing that happens is the difference between resolution and compromise. With resolution, it's a win-win. Both people get what they want. With compromise, one person's giving up something that they want. They're not quite getting 100% what they want. There's a bit of a giving up. And that can lead to a future situation where the person still feels dissatisfied. And so you've got to get to a point where there is real resolution. The person's saying, look, I'm not really having to compromise and give something up. I may have changed my position. I may be prepared to give something, but in the process of giving, I haven't felt as though I have lost. And I have really, in a sense, compromised by not having what I want. And I can change position, and it's called resolution. And so how can I bring it to resolution? And I don't really have some hidden resentment still going on after I've said it's all okay, when it's not really okay. And I've thought, well, I've had to give myself away in this instance. And the process to get to resolution is to keep talking and keep speaking the truth. And to say, well, this is my truth. This is what I believe. This is what's happening for me. Understanding that it's my reality. It's not the absolute truth. No one has the absolute truth. Each person brings in their own points of view, and also respecting the other person's right to have their points of view. And so they declare their point of view, that's their truth. I declare my point of view, this is my truth. And here are the two truths, and we keep talking about it. And we don't dump the emotion on each other. And we are there saying, yes, I want my partner to win for themselves, just as I want to win for myself. And it's not me winning at the expense of the other person. And also recognising that when I'm talking to someone and there's an upset, there's some aspect of the emotional child that's been activated. And often the rational reasons that have been given for this experience aren't the real reasons, and aren't the reasons that are going to make the difference to resolving the argument. And until I can get to the subplot and see what's really going on underneath, I may not be able to bring resolution through in a relationship and have an adequate negotiation with my partner. And to me, that's the key cornerstone of a relationship being successful, the ability to be able to problem solve.
So we're on to the popular topic of money in a relationship. And my understanding with the money is that money represents energy. And how much energy am I bringing into a relationship, and what to do with this energy and to organize it. But like any other form of energy, most of us don't understand that a lot of our money issues comes from our primal beliefs about who we are and about how life is. And so there are many, many beliefs we have about money. Whatever beliefs we have about money, whatever they are, we will make them come true. Because thought is creative, which we mentioned in the very first video, and our primal beliefs will come true. So if I think that money is hard to come by, it will be hard to come by for me. Now what I have to watch out is that I don't project that onto my partner, and it's hard to come by for him as well. If I believe that I have to work hard for money, that's what I will have to do. The best way to work through the money issues in your relationship is for each of you to take a fresh piece of paper, you can do that now, and write out every single belief that you have about money. After you've done that, decide which belief you want to keep. Remember that the mind will always prove itself right. The mind will justify anything. But what I'm going for here is that you have a thorough understanding that thought is creative. That if you work out your thoughts around money and you decide whether you're going to choose to keep those thoughts or not, if you choose to let them go and create new paradigms for you and your partners and families, then you can do that. And that takes you to a different level. And that is understanding the money game. The money has been created in our society as a game. And there are a few basic rules. You spend less than you earn. A basic rule that has not been encouraged in our society. We've been encouraged to borrow and to have bank cards and Visa cards and this card and that, and live beyond how much we actually earn. But there are a few basic rules about the money game. And if you are going to choose to live in our society, everybody really needs to know these basic rules about the money game. The same as you need to know the basic rules about health. The way I like to look at it is that I say health and wealth are a product of your daily habits. What are my daily habits? Am I spending more than I'm earning? Have I unrealistic expectations about my skill worth in society? So there's various points, and you can go and read and study and learn about economics, accounting, sales, marketing, it goes on, about the money game. However, they will only work on one level. Many person who's known the money game has still created bankruptcy. Why might that be? Not because they don't know the money game. It would be because of their core beliefs about money, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. What are your core beliefs about money? Remember, thought is creative. Am I going to keep these beliefs, or am I going to choose to let them go and have them differently in my life?
About our money situation, I mean, considering we're going to get married and, we need to know what we want to plan for and budget and that sort of thing. What do you think?
It's okay, it's fine by me.
Oh, that's good. Well,
I think
we should do it now.
yeah, we should get into it.
All right.
What would you like to discuss?
Well, we need, I suppose, ideas of, I'd like to have some money for myself. I mean, I'd like to pool my resources with you.
The money game. This is not necessarily easy. As I'm saying, on one hand, we have ourselves, which cannot be separated from the money game. With ourselves, we have our unconscious beliefs about money. And on the other hand, we've got society and what society has set up for us in this money game. So somehow we have to marry the two. It's no use just putting up our hands and saying, well, I give up. First of all, we have to clear our unconscious beliefs that come from the past about what was true for our family when we were growing up and what's true for everybody else out there, and separate ourselves from society when we do that. What are the beliefs I really want to believe? And as we know now, thought is creative, and so I'll create those thoughts. On the other hand, we have to seriously educate ourselves into the money game, into what works as a product in the marketplace in the 1990s and the year 2000 and so forth. What is needed and wanted by our society, especially what is needed. Sometimes we can educate people to want what is needed. And of course, some of the best educators or advertisers, and notice I said educators or advertisers, have actually educated us to believing that we need things that really we don't need, or that we want things that we don't need. So what does society really want? And what is my unique talent, my unique ability? And how can I marry my unique ability, my essence and my expression with what society needs? And then how can I market it so that it can be profitable and earn me a living and sustainable for the future and work in cooperation with everybody else? So the way I understand it is that you have to work on three things now. Your unconscious beliefs about money, your continuous education about the money game, and then your inner self. How and what you're going to choose to express that to create a living for yourself and your family. And it can be done as long as we marry all three of those together in a realistic understanding of what's needed and wanted in the 20th century, 21st century, what's my unique talent, and letting go of the negative thoughts beforehand.
Another important thing to be aware of in relationships is emotions, because your emotions are the thing that often come up in relationships. When you're thinking of emotions, think of the word emotion. You can think of it almost as being energy in motion. And the way I think about emotions is to think of a river. And like a river, there are times when it's in flood, and there are times when it's drought and there's very little occurring. And so it's just like with your emotions. There are times when you feel very emotional and other times you don't feel emotional. But somewhere back in our childhood, we've been told that certain emotions aren't appropriate, in particular our anger and our sadness. And so we've learned to block our emotions, and we've put a wall across that river, a dam, and the emotion has backed up behind it. And then it starts to become a problem, because all that emotion doesn't disappear, it stays stored. And it builds up, and it builds up, and it builds up. And it's just waiting for a time when it's going to explode or fall or come out and just overflow. And so you can find situations where people will get very emotional and very upset over some quite trivial thing. And the emotion that they're releasing is way out of proportion to the event. And really the emotion they're experiencing has not very much to do with the event. It's triggered it off, but it's really not the event itself. It's really activating all this stored emotion that's been put there from the past. And so we have to learn some way to allow our emotions to flow without dumping them on other people, and also recognizing that my emotion is me, it's my responsibility. The other person hasn't caused my emotion, but rather the other person has triggered off something that's within myself. And so the dilemma that occurs with emotions is responsibility, which is my responsibility, versus expression. And I need to allow this emotion to flow so that I don't store this emotion. This stored emotion we call the emotional mass, almost like the emotional mess. And how can we allow this emotion not to be stored in ourselves and to flow at the same time, not to dump them on other people, and recognise that they're not responsible for our emotions, but rather they're myself. And so what tends to happen for most people is they're not aware of how to resolve this dilemma, and they just suppress their emotions and they hold them back and they don't express what they feel and they're not communicating, and then they can't hold it back any longer and it just blurts out and it feels inappropriate or it's not okay. Other times, if their self-control is great enough, they're able to hold back those emotions until such time as they actually become physically ill. And some physical illness or an accident or something occurs, and it's really this suppressed energy that hasn't been let go of. And so we need to find, how can I release my emotions safely, and also how do I not dump on other people and make them responsible for my emotions. Just before I go into that, I just want to mention a characteristic about emotions, in that emotions can also sit in three states. It can be in inertia, where the emotion is actually being withheld and suppressed. It can be in activity, where it's being expressed and blurted out. And it can be in balance. You'll see by this example how these two people, first one's in an inertia, and then they go into activity, and how they bring their emotions into balance.
It's just something I want to bring up here. On the way home this afternoon, there was a slight mishap. The guy in front of me locked up his brakes, and look, I've rammed your your car straight into the back of his car, you know, but there was nothing I could do about it. Just like, I know I was supposed to get the brakes fixed last weekend, but
Sure, don't worry about it.
it's just happened, you know. Just let it go, and we'll get it fixed. Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Look, there's just something I need to talk to you about. Coming on the way home from work this afternoon, there was this guy in front of me, and he, for whatever reason, you know, he just locked up his brakes and
So
just
what
plowed.
happened?
The front bonnet of your car's written off. I couldn't help it. It just went straight in.
I told you last week, why didn't you get it fixed? I asked you to fix it. Why are you so stupid? I said, why don't you get it fixed? And immediately you just say, oh, I'll just carry on the way I normally do. And what happens? How much is it going to cost? How much?
I've got to look at
Fortunes.
it. Insured, you know, it is insured.
God.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Look, there's something I need to talk to you about. On the way home this afternoon, I was driving down past Epping, and this guy in front of me just locked up his brakes, and there wasn't much I could do about it, and I've skidded and ploughed straight into the back of his car. And a fair bit of damage to the bonnet.
Well, that really makes me angry. I mean, I am feeling angry about that. Really, this could have been avoided before the situation. And we've really got to resolve this situation. We really have to do something about it. I mean, we discussed it and we said we would get it fixed so that we wouldn't have this problem. It's very dangerous driving like that. You know that, so why have you done this? It was only a moment just to consider how dangerous it is and get it fixed before. And now it's too late. It's going to cost a fortune. It has made me angry. I'm sorry, but it could have been avoided.
Yeah, I suppose it could have been avoided.
And so you can see that holding it in inertia doesn't work. And when people hold back their emotions, what happens is it becomes covert. The energy hasn't gone. If you're in a working situation, if people are holding back some resentment they feel towards you, they may not express it, but in very subtle ways it'll come out. They'll be late, they'll forget things, they'll make mistakes, things will be just left out, and what you'll find is that it'll be very difficult to achieve things around this person, and you may not necessarily know, because they're holding something in inertia. In activity, the person is very aggressive, and they can be very bullying, and they're just blurting over the top, and no one can stand it. And so neither way works. It's a matter of bringing it into balance. And to bring something into balance actually requires two things. One is moving your own emotional energy so that you don't continue to hold the upset. And two, understanding the cause of why you're upset. And you can move your own emotional energy in many different ways. You can go for a run, as I mentioned before, a swim, singing lessons, singing is great, dancing, lots of different things like that. Anything that's physical, anything that gets you breathing will help move the emotions. You can go to the footy and watch the football and shout at the ref, and you'll let go of a lot of emotion. And you can let go of a lot of upset, and you feel better. But you might then go back into the situation at work, and next thing you know, you're upset again. And then you need to go back to the footy the following week and let it out again. And so you go through that cycle. So letting it out is great, but it's no good if you haven't changed the pattern, so you don't get re-stimulated. And so for this, it needs to understand your personal law, your primal belief, some of the things that we mentioned before. You need to bring it to a level of understanding. Why am I really getting upset? What does it represent? Who am I? And where's it coming from? And these questions, you need to just look at yourself and start to examine yourself. And sometimes it's difficult to actually see those things and understand them on your own. Sometimes you do need to go and talk to someone else about them, because I have sometimes a blind spot about certain issues. It's my scotoma. And I'm not able to see why I get stuck and why I get caught and why I get upset in a particular situation. And I need to understand the reasons why it happens. And having someone else who's not me and can just look at it objectively, they're able to say, oh, look, it's to do with this reason or that reason. So the sort of ways I would recommend to people in order to understand their emotions is, first of all, to talk to someone else. Secondly, to maybe go to a therapist, which is like to talk to a professional rather than talking to a friend. And thirdly, you may keep a journal. There was a time when I kept a journal of the things I got upset about. I would write down. Every time I got upset, I wrote the thing down. And at the end of the month, I'd look at all the things that upset me. And I could see a pattern emerging from what upset me. And then I was able then to discern, oh, right, I got upset when I felt I was being disempowered. I felt upset when someone was ignoring me. I got upset if someone was taking more than their share. They weren't sharing. So I could look at, what are these reasons? And then as I begin to understand them, the cause actually goes back to some part in childhood. For instance, there was one occasion I can remember where I got upset because my wife wanted my chips, and she had already bought her own and eaten them, and she still wanted mine, and I'm upset by it. And I'm thinking, this is ridiculous, and yet I'm upset by it. And it was because when I finally traced it back, I was the eldest child in my family, and I was always made to share with my brothers and sisters. And it was very hard for me to have my own thing just for me. And there was still some hidden resentment. Once I understood that, it changed. And so I could share the chips. There's no big deal anymore. And it's so once you understand that, you can diffuse and change why it's happening, and you don't have to be upset. Also, it's important to remember that people are emotionally fragile. Most people have not released their emotional mass. Most people have not dealt with their past feelings and their past emotion. And so most people will get upset very easily. And even if I'm quite justified and I come to someone and I say, look, I feel upset, if I'm not careful, it will create an upset in them and maybe an argument. So I need to be very careful about the way in which I speak to people about it, because people are emotionally fragile. An example would be if I went to a party and someone was there and they were just getting angry with the pot plant and had nothing to do with me, had nothing to do with anyone else in the room, and yet this person was being angry at this pot plant. I would say that more than half the people, after about 2 or 3 minutes, would be getting angry with this guy, because his anger, even though it had nothing to do with them, would immediately activate their own hidden anger, and then they would start to project it onto him, because they would see him as being the cause of their anger. And so it's important to realise that people are emotionally fragile, and it's just important to not dump on them and to be able to communicate as honestly as I possibly can, and also to look at the causes as to why I feel emotional about the situation, and where does that relate to me and back to my inner childhood. Another important area that occurs in relationships is the sexuality between two partners. Over the years when I've counselled people, what I've found is they might come in with a problem around sex, but once we've started to sit down and discuss it, we've found that it's really sex was the symptom. It wasn't the basic cause. And in order to heal a lot of the issues around sex, it was a matter of looking at the emotional component and the understanding and the communication that occurred between the two people. And that really, in sex, people were looking for something more than just the physical act, and to understand what is the true purpose of sex. What are people trying to really get out of sex? Sure, when you're young, there's a real strong hormonal experience and you want to like go for it and really let go your sexual energy. But after a while, it gets beyond that, and you're looking for more than just letting go of your load. You're looking to actually come into intimacy with someone. And one of the biggest difficulties in relationships is for two people to be intimate with one another, to come close, to have that connection. And that also goes back to the intimacy that the person may have experienced as a child, the intimacy they experienced with their mother and their father when they were growing up, and how it affected them and their ability to be intimate with their partner. I know that in the past, when I was in a relationship with my ex-wife, when we were making passionate love and we got very close to orgasming, what would happen for me is I would kind of split and I'd start thinking about something else. It was like that intensity and that intimacy was just too great for me at that time, and I wasn't used to it, and I was afraid of it. And I would actually kind of withdraw, and she would look at me and say, "What's going on?" And she would feel that shift of my attention and feel disappointed. And then it would come back, and then we'd continue. But it took me a long time before I realised that I was afraid of intimacy, and I wasn't able to stay present and be there and stay connected to my partner. In sex, or in the sexual encounter, there's actually 4 levels to it. And on the first level, it's physical sex. As you would imagine, it's to penis in vagina, it's the normal sort of thing that you'd expect sex to be. On the second level, it's emotional, and that means there is a connection at the heart, there's a union, there's a coming together of the heart. And on the third level, it's mental, where the minds are attuned together, they're in sync, in unison, they're almost like one mind for the moment of that encounter, of that connection. And then on a fourth level, there's a spiritual connection, there's a spiritual sex, there's a spiritual union that takes place between two people. So in sex, the main obstacle to having the strong sexual connection is the lack of intimacy that exists between the two parties. And the purpose of sex is to bring about union to support that intimacy. And very often all that happens is, usually from a male's perspective, they will see sex as just being a physical encounter, whereas women can see it being the physical encounter and also the emotional connection. And if there's not the emotional connection, they can feel robbed by it. It's empty. It hasn't given them the sort of satisfaction that they need. And for a man, if he's not connected to that emotional part of himself, well, he's wondering, well, what's the problem? What's the big deal? You know, it was okay for me, but he's failed to connect to his emotional side. And so with sex, we're then looking at how can we bring the encounter to a greater level of intimacy, and how can we bring it to a point where it also moves from just being a purely physical experience to also being an emotional, mental and spiritual experience. This is a very high order. This is not something that most people achieve, but when they do achieve it, it's a tremendous sense of satisfaction. It's actually something that brings the relationship together, binds the relationship together, and makes it much stronger. In fact, sex is one of the things that just helps you want to be in a relationship with your partner.
So sex is one of the key elements of relationships, but it's important not to get hung up on just penis and vagina, just the physical act. What we need here is to understand that the sexual energy is just part of the body, part of the energetic process. And we need to marry that with the love energy coming from the heart and what is often called the eros energy, or the sharing energy between two people. So sex is a combination, when it's really, really experienced in its full beauty, it's a combination of the sexual energy of the body coming from the base area, base chakra, and the second chakra that's coming up, which is another energy center, and then that is married with the heart center. And of course, the sharing of the whole being, of the intellect, the emotions, and the sexual will lead to a wonderful experience. But it's not just a physical, mechanical experience. And it needs to be known that the sexual act is more than just the physical. There is also a huge psychic element that takes place when the semen is released into the woman. It's not only the physical semen, it's the psychic energy of that person, of that soul. So who you actually make love with or have sexual intercourse with is very, very important for your whole beingness.
And so in this enactment, we've got two people coming together and coming into intimacy. So just watch it closely and watch how they are gradually starting to move together, and the uncertainty and the kind of doubt, and as they move together, and then finally for a brief few seconds there is real intimacy. See if you can catch it. Did you see that? Did you see them both coming together and really just touching and being there totally with each other for those brief few seconds? One of the recommendations I make to couples if they're having difficulties with sex is that they make an agreement beforehand that for 5 nights they will cuddle and touch and be close to each other and be intimate, and that they decide that sometime on the weekend they will have sex with each other. They may not determine an exact date or an exact time because it may not necessarily be appropriate at that time to do it, but they just, first of all, just build the intimacy between each other. They'll touch and they'll look into each other's eyes and they'll talk with each other and they'll cuddle and they'll hold each other, but they won't have physical sex. And gradually, as the intimacy builds, it's almost like 2 cups filling. And if I keep filling the intimacy connection between myself and my partner, it gets more and more and more full, and the next thing I know, sex becomes just a normal, natural, very easy thing to occur. It's like the next step. And so rather than trying to push it or force it, what I do is I build the rapport, I build the intimacy with my partner. And in building that, then sex just becomes that next step, the easy thing that occurs, and there's no sense of being afraid or it's not okay or it doesn't feel right, it just flows. And so when we're looking at sex then, how can I build more intimacy with my partner? How can I spend the time and be with them together and be together with my partner and just be able to share? One of the things I would suggest you do is what this couple's just done, where you both sit opposite each other and just look into each other's eyes. And in this brief, we set it up as Plutonian sex, where 2 people from the planet Pluto, and we imagine that their hands were their sexual organs, and they're coming together just with touching each other. And it's like having sex just through touching. Just try it. Just be intimate. Just be there, present with your partner. See how that feels. 'Cause as you develop and grow that intimacy between you, you'll find the sex will just flow.
So here we are coming now to the end of this video on creating successful relationships. And we've looked at many, many facets of relationships. But what about your relationships and what about your future? How can you create your ideal relationship? Of course, you need to complete with your previous relationships. You need to know what you want. And then you need to apply the understanding triangle, the purpose triangle, and the love triangle. And then you need to work through your unconscious patterning and conditioning from the past. One of the best ways of helping you with this is to make yourself a shopping list. And in this shopping list, what I'd like you to do is to write down your ideal relationship. Who would it be with? What are the characteristics of that person? The age, perhaps their occupation, where would they live? What type of background might they come from? Be very, very honest with yourself about the type of person that you would want. And it's okay to be specific about that as well. And then in this shopping list, the second part of it is what type of relationship would you like with this person? Would you like a monogamous relationship? A full commitment? Would you like to live together or live separately? Would you like to share the bank accounts or not? Do you want it to be an honest, creative relationship? What would be the purpose of the relationship? Creating this shopping list is one of the most powerful ways of magnetizing to you your ideal partner and your ideal relationship. Remember, it needs to be specific. Put down the time frame that you want to have this created from. And then take a moment after you have written the shopping list to visualize creating the successful partner and relationship. Visualization can be an extremely powerful tool. A daily visualization before you get up in the morning and at evening before you go to sleep on something that you definitely want or want to create can be a powerful way of magnetizing that towards you. One of the very popular techniques is to create a visualization of your ideal partner and your ideal relationship surrounded in beautiful energy of pink, and then let it go to the universe. As it goes out to the universe, it collects, the pink energy helps collect the love, letting go of your attachment to it, and in the same time intending it to come back to you. So the shopping list is a very, very powerful way of creating your future. What often happens is that we want to create our future, but like a boat going along a harbour, some boats have huge wakes. What we need to do to make our voyage through life easier and cleaner is to really clean up the wake behind us. And one of the ways we do this is that we have an integrity list. In other words, really completing with all the things that have slowed us down. It's like, another way of looking at it is like having barnacles on a rudder. They would slow the boat down. Is that correct? You understand that? So we're going to clean up all the barnacles. And sometimes the barnacles might be just simply all the things that we're resisting in our life, such as paying our bills, mowing the lawn, cleaning the car, cleaning out the cupboards, filing the photographs from the old holidays, ringing up Auntie Jane and wishing her happy birthday, going around to a neighbour that you meant to take some scones to last week and haven't done it yet. You'll know the things that you've been resisting. So if you make a list, and simply it starts this way, what I am resisting is. On the next page, that becomes your to-do list with a time and a date beside when you're going to do it. So you clean up your wake. You clean the barnacles off every aspect of your life. And you'll find that your shopping list for creating the ideal partner and your ideal relationship will just take place very easily and very effectively.
So in today's world, relationships require a lot of understanding, a lot of work. In the past, for mum and dad, it was very easy. The situation had just been worked out. You're going to get married, you'll be together forever and ever, and that's it. That's the end of the story. But for us, it's changed. The values have changed, the expectations that people have changed, and the institution of marriage is not held in the same regard as it used to be. And so things are different now. And in order to make a successful relationship, it requires understanding, and it requires application, and it requires a commitment. And in this video, we talked about the different sorts of relationships that we have. We talked about the 5 stages of completion, how we bring issues through to completion that may have affected us in our early childhood, and maybe even issues that are presently affecting us in our present relationship. Negotiations, how do I get through an emotional upset with my partner? Looking at money and the sort of things that it brings up in the relationship and how we can handle the money better. Looking at the emotions and how emotions work and what has to be done around emotions. Understanding sexuality and the connection of intimacy and the need for union and what sex is really trying to do in a relationship. We're also looking to set your goals and determine your future, not just allow things to flow, but rather, you can allow things to flow, but rather to have more direction so that flow can occur more easily without it going somewhere that you don't want it to. My experience has been that I've been through a number of relationships and had a lot of difficulty in relationships, and it's been a very hard road. But now I'm married, I've been married for 5 years, and I can truthfully say my relationship is better than it's ever been. And I feel more in love and more connected. And I know that these things work because they've worked for me. And I know they can work for you. And all you've got to do is try them.
So this has been a long Creating Successful Relationship video. And together with the first video, there's a lot of information there for you to study and review and practice. I suppose for me the key element is it doesn't matter what I learn, doesn't matter where I'm at, I have to really just be myself and really start to love myself and accept myself, forgive myself for exactly who I am, and my partner will mirror that to me. And this is not only my present partner, but it's my children as well as my father as well as my sister. They'll accept me for who I am, and they do. And as I've been practicing all of what I've been teaching you here, the relationships are getting better and better. And the key is to accept yourself as you are. Be yourself as you are, and be true to yourself wherever you are.